What is the biggest culture shock you have ever faced? Part 2.
Japan has interesting toilets. Maybe a bit of explanation would be in order. I lived in China for more than half of my life. The public toilets in China are known as squat toilets, where you squat down on top of the toilet and do your business. Of course, there are toilets that look like those in America, where you sit on it, but those were uncommon in public areas. Eventually, my family moved to America and I grew accustomed to the standard toilets that you sat on to do your business. After a few years of living in America, those were the toilet norm for me. Fast forward a few years to when I visit Japan, and we can finally get to the actual content of this answer. Everything was going smoothly until I encountered one of these things. Now I don't know about you, but that looks like Professor X's wheelchair on steroids. I was confused when I first saw this. What was I supposed to do, sit down and start typing in commands for the toilet to clean my posterior to a shine? I decided to just defecate and figure it out along the way. I had already finished doing my business until I realized that the labels on the buttons were in Japanese. I know some of these toilets have English, but apparently I was unlucky. While I was provided with the luxury of having a manual override option, which is just a technical term for toilet paper, it had conveniently ran out at just the right time. So, I was forced to figure out the buttons on the strange machine in order to clean my behind. I looked at it for a few seconds and I decided to press the button that looked like a jet of water was shooting into your butt. Water blasted up my rear at high pressure. This is of course just an exaggeration, but it felt like I was getting blasted by a high-powered water hose. Needless to say, it was not a pleasant experience for someone who was used to squat toilets. This may sound really dramatic or exaggerated, but how would you feel if you had a spout of water cleaning your butt for the first time? As I learned later on, I had pressed the rear cleaning button. It turns out, there is a soft rear cleaning function that would have been better suited to me. I'm not sure about this part, but I think that whoever was before me had turned the pressure all the way up to maximum. After recovering from my initial shock of water being sprayed at my rear, I looked at the control panel once more, I pressed another button, drying my behind and finally allowing myself to stand up. After much experimentation, I managed to flush the toilet and get out of the restroom. For the rest of the trip, I had my dad teach me the way of the toilet, and how to use it because he could read Japanese. Notice how I managed to make butt cleaning sound as elegant as possible? I had gone to Sri Lanka on a youth camp last year in July. In Indian restaurants and most others, when you don't want to finish your food, you can just leave it there and walk out. It's okay as long as you pay for it. In Sri Lanka, there was this weird dish of spaghetti and neem, pesto sauce, and I really wanted to try it. I don't know what I was thinking when I ordered it because it was the worst thing I'd ever eaten. I would rank it a few places below poop on how tasty it was. There was no way I was eating that. So I just left my plate and began to walk away. A waiter approached me. "Sir, you left your food behind by mistake." "Oh no, I can't finish it. I don't like the taste. I have paid for it anyways." "That isn't the issue. If you don't eat it, you need to pay double of what you initially paid for wasting food." "What?" "Yes, you heard me right." I inquired about this and he was telling the truth. It was like that in most restaurants in the country. I didn't have any more money on me then, so I had to finish it. The waiter stood there, watching me until I swallowed every last bit of it. Guys, don't order what you can't eat in Sri Lanka. There's a pop culture line in Europe called the tomato potato line. On one side, every meal is potato-based. On the other, it seems not a single meal is eaten without a tomato in the form of sauce, pizza, salad, etc. I grew up on the potato side. Every day was a form of potatoes, usually roasted as a side with a form of meat. To switch things up, there were also boiled potatoes, mashed potatoes, potato pancakes, and so many more I can't think of. Then I crossed the line. Obviously I'd had tomatoes in the form of pasta sauce or marinara, but never to the frequency or variety that they have on the other side of the border. Yes, I'm being dramatic. Bear with me. It was like my taste buds had exploded. Every meal had a new flavor and depth that I had never experienced. The tomatoes were different too, better quality, grown near to the location rather than being shipped hundreds of miles. So much more spice and taste can be incorporated into a tomato-based dish. Though I may be biased, I then vowed to never stay in potato territory for food. I learned to cook, reducing my potato consumption to maybe once a month, and have since relished in the variety of foods there are to try from so many different cuisines. 1. Soft drinks. When the first time I was stepping my feet in Germany, I was shocked when I saw how people drink soft drinks almost all the time. In the morning before work, my colleagues will drink a can of Coca-Cola, and every time we have a short break, again always Coca-Cola or other kind of soft drink. And not forget to mention Red Bull. This kind of energy drink it seemed becoming everybody's favorite drinks to pump their spirit. One package of can soft drink contains 24 pieces. And it's common when I saw some of my colleagues have it in their room. 2. Sparkling water. When the first time I bought a bottle of mineral water in Lidl, I was confused why the water tasted just like a soda water. And when I read the label, I just realized if that is a sparkling water. And another fact, when I made an inventory in my hotel, the consumption number of a sparkling water way much bigger than a regular water by our guests. Don't ask me why, because I don't know the answer. I never saw a bottle of sparkling water being sold in my country in regular supermarket, and if they do, I can guarantee no one will ever buy it. As an Asian man, at home, I drink a regular water without gas. And of course some iced tea. Yes, there are a lot of soft drinks being sold in the supermarket nearby, but our family did not get used to consuming it. I moved to the US after getting married. My husband and I went to a restaurant on the very first day for lunch. We parked the car and went inside. Without waiting, I simply walked and took a chair for myself at a table. I could see everybody staring at me like I've done a big crime. I turned around and found my husband standing near the door and laughing. Out of embarrassment, I stood up, placed the chair back in place and walked away. So then I came to know that a designated person specifically asks us how many people are there to dine and leads us to our table. You should enter only with him and not grab a table greedily. I am from India and getting the table norm is, you walk in. Scan the area like a hawk. Find an empty table, sometimes an empty chair also would suffice. Sit and order your food. Japanese. I was in Yokohama, Japan for a couple of months and had the most pleasing and absorbing experience. Escalators, people always stand on one side and leave the other for those who want to walk. Tactile paving, these are specially designed textured ground surface indicators found on sidewalks, stairs for the visually impaired and can be observed throughout the country. Incidentally, Japan is the first country which introduced this. Change trays, one can see small trays that are used when settling daily cash transactions. Instead of payment to the clerk, here you are generally expected to put your payment into a tray that is presented expressly for the purpose. Wearing surgical masks. One can see people wearing surgical masks out in public or workplace when they are sick. This is not because it is life-threatening but to be considerate of others. Bowing, Ajiji, this is one of their ways of showing respect. I was surprised to see salespersons bowing while we were passing by in a shopping area. Also, it is a custom to bow to departing vehicles, airplanes, buses. This was one of my first encounters in the airport. Train etiquette, talking loudly in Japanese trains is a big no-no. Special, women-only compartments is common in India, but the below markings is not common. Japanese toilets, I was awestruck with most technologically advanced toilets of Japan. Karaoke, if you are in Japan then don't miss to land in a karaoke shop. That was an experience. Fake food displays can be found in almost every restaurant in Japan. These incredibly realistic food models function to give a visual idea of what kinds of foods the restaurant serves. Chopsticks, okay, this was difficult. Coming from an Indian background, it is sometimes troubling for me to use fork and knife, forget about chopsticks. But I am much better now. In fact, these were one of the souvenirs from Japan. Food, Being a vegetarian, I struggled a lot in getting proper vegetarian food in Japan. Whenever I convey that I am a vegetarian, the immediate question would be, do you eat something in fish? I survived with edamame, tempura and some seaweed sushi most of the time. However, it was a pleasure to see my colleagues enjoying the diverse cuisine. Queuing culture, Japanese people are excessively good at standing in lines. What a discipline! And this is not only in train stations but also in almost every possible place. Earthquake-proof buildings. I have read somewhere that Japan is a leader in engineering earthquake-proof buildings. True indeed. One day we were in middle of a meeting in our office when one of our colleagues exclaimed in low tone, "Did the building just shook?" Then we were all like, yes it did. Experienced a minor tremor and continued to work very normally. This is not a culture shock directly, but still we were shocked. Those days in Japan gave me some of the most unforgettable and distinctive memories. I would love to go there again and again. Thank you, Japan, for all the hospitality. When I first moved to the United States, I saw couples kissing in the middle of the lobby of my engineering building. They would kiss after coming out of a class, when they meet for lunch, when they finished a difficult assignment. They hugged very often. Girls wore leggings and cropped tops to classes. Some of them came in their gym clothes to class. Guys wore shorts to class. Students called their professors with their first names. No, sir, or madam. I lived with American girls, 12 of them, in a dorm kind of setting. These girls were super skinny and roamed around with just minimum pieces of clothes on. They looked gorgeous. They sat like that outside in the lawns to get some sunshine and tan themselves, and no one would stare at them. No one passed cheap comments. No one teased them. I was walking from the Bay Bridge towards Lombard Street in SF one evening, and at the crossing I saw two guys kissing for the first time in my life, and it gave me goosebumps. I am not averse to gay people, but seeing it in person was just a new experience for me. This does not happen in public in the place where I come from. I was 21 when I first came here, from India. I had heard all this and watched it in movies, but to witness it with my eyes on a daily basis was a different experience altogether. I have a close American friend. He doesn't live with his parents who live in the same city, even when they have the biggest of houses I've seen in Boulder. He instead chose to live with 7 roommates in a small house just because he doesn't like OCD attitude of his dad. He would talk about his dad's girlfriend and his mom's new husband. Such things don't happen in the place where I come from. Almost every American I met here has a stepdad or stepmom. This was new for me. This is not so common in the place where I come from. My colleagues used to come into work at 6 a.m. and they had dinner at 5 p.m. This is very common here in the US. Such things don't happen in the place where I come from. These things I think could be a part of the culture shock I experienced on moving to the US. The biggest culture that I have really shocked is eating food with hands in India. After washing your hands, you should eat food with your right hand. Indian culture, the left hand is commonly viewed as dirty and unsanitary, and therefore rude to eat with. Avoid serving, eating, or touching any of the food with your left hand. And the other point is that avoid letting the food touch your palms. Hold the food near the tips of your fingers when you're bringing it to your mouth. That is a good experience. If you travel in India, don't be afraid. Try it. I was in Budapest, walking on a road just beside the footpath. There was a car behind me and I was unknowingly walking in the middle of the road, until I realized and made way for it. The person didn't honk even once and kept driving behind me at the same speed I was walking. Really? Hats off to their patience. In Amsterdam, a cab driver asked me if I wanted a ride till hotel. I told him I wanted to call my colleague who was supposed to pick me up. He took out his iPhone 6s Plus and asked me my colleague's number. Then dialed him and we spoke for a couple of minutes. I then told this cab driver my colleague is coming. He said no problem and left with a smile. Somewhere in Europe I was walking in a huge park. There was a wooden bench in the pathway. A girl sitting in a boy's lap and they both were kissing each other passionately. It continued, like they are the only two people there. When would I have such freedom? I mumbled. In Amsterdam Decathlon shop, I saw an orange headset. I love orange color and I wanted only that piece, which was for around 14.99 euros. Then I noticed its right side clothing was bit peeled off. It wasn't that noticeable, so I asked him I'd have this one. He said, "Sir, I'd look for another piece. This has a slight defect." Pointing towards peeled cloth. He searched for several minutes, but did not find an orange piece. He then billed it and handed me. I saw the bill with 11 euros. He said, "Sorry about the piece. Since there is no other available and this one you see has slight defect, we offered 4 euros discount." He smiled and I really didn't believe him. I was so happy. I was in Singapore this February 2017. Our tour guide proudly asked us in the bus to look outside and tell us what they notice or see different than our country, India. Everyone looked outside. Few minutes passed by and people shouted, "Traffic police?" She said, "Yes. We have no traffic police. Everything is monitored on the CCTV cameras." One of the reasons there is so much obedience in public. When I was in Manila, Philippines, on my last day my colleagues threw a party for me. They asked me which beer I want and I said I don't drink. They insisted, so I asked for something on the menu. To my awe, there comes a 2-liter vessel full of beer for only me. My colleague said we drink this whole thing alone. I just had few sips, after which I just couldn't take more. It still had more than 80% beer left in there. To my awe, he drank his own beers and then drank from this vessel to empty it in next few minutes. I never knew humans could have such capacity. The biggest culture shock I ever lived was in Texas. I was arrested, Starsky and Hutch style, and jailed, basically for excessive speed. I was on a visit at Texas A&M University at College Station, when friends from Dallas, CA. 180 miles equals 300 kilometers north, invited me for the Easter weekend. On the I-45 motorway, I drove at 80 to 90 miles per hour, so as to alleviate the boredom from the long and monotonous route. I was aware of the speed limit at 75 miles per hour, but I felt safe as most drivers did the same, and some drove even faster. As I was getting close to Dallas, I noticed a police car behind me, with its red lights on. Based on the way the police behave in most countries, I took this for a request to make way. So I pulled over to the right lane and slowed down a little, and I didn't bother more about it. Then, I noticed the police were still there, but I didn't understand what was going on. I guess they were after somebody, but did not figure out it was me. On the one hand, I wasn't driving faster than most people around. On the other hand, I never thought they would quietly stay behind me if they wanted me to stop. My generation wasn't addicted to U.S. series. Our homegrown cops order drivers to stop, not by staying behind them, but by moving to their left and signaling with the right arm. I was beginning to find the situation weird, when another police car came to my left, and a policeman signaled me to stop. I immediately did. Then the big show began. The policeman yelled at me to get out of the car and put my hands on it. One was pointing a gun at me. I complied. They frisked and handcuffed me. They asked me why I hadn't stopped at once. I answered that I had not understood. At first they obviously didn't believe me, but I explained that the practice is different in my country. They insisted that I had no valid driver's license, as I didn't possess a Texan one. However, I showed them both my French license and an international driving permit, which is recognized in Texas. I had purposely fetched it at my prefecture before leaving France. I felt eerie, as though I had gone out of my body, and watched myself caught in a cheesy crime TV series. Without subtitles, my command of spoken English is sufficient for daily communication but, well, not perfect. Broad Texan shouted at machine gun speed, with a twang as thick as guacamole, is a bit of a challenge for me. Progressively, I figured out the situation. Those who had chased me first were from Ellis County, and the one who had signaled me to stop was from Dallas County. I had crossed a county line, so the Ellis policemen had to request the help of the Dallas police. I had made them look like fools before their colleagues, so they were quite upset. But my crossing the county line also qualified as evading arrest, and evading arrest in a motor vehicle is a felony in Texas law. The Ellis County policemen called their superiors. After a 1-hour wait in their car, still handcuffed, I learned that I was going to be taken to jail. The cheesy HBO nightmare was going on. So I was introduced to the Ellis County Jail in Waxahachie, Texas. The inner child thought, what a name. Sounds like the chant of the Indian warrior after he has captured the white guy who ventured too far and tied him to the torture post. My adult self added, they have killed and removed the Indians, but they have kept the tortures. The prison personnel seemed surprised to see someone jailed for an offense he did not knowingly commit. They even said the charges should be dropped, as I did not know the custom and had never been arrested before. But, anyway, the sheriff had ordered to jail me, so they had to accommodate me. The check-in formalities are surprising. For instance, the disinfection shower. You undress, a guy comes with a big sprayer like those used in vineyards, and sprays the cold stinking disinfectant on you, first front, then rear. You put on a heavy brownish overall. If you ask for reading material, they give you a Bible, a special edition with a foreword saying that God forgives even the worst offenders. Why not? This was Good Friday, after all. I read all of St. Matthew and half of St. John during my stay. It was time to proceed to the detention room. I was quite anxious, expecting to spend the night in a cell with a few hardened felons, and wondering how they would deal with me. Fortunately, petty offenders are kept in large dormitories of 40-odd beds, with a TV set, tables, and a jailer staying in all the time. No way to pick on anybody when 40 witnesses and an armed guard are present. I won't say it was a pleasant time, but it was interesting. There was the local drug pusher, locked up without bail until his judgment. He was accused of destroying evidence, because he was cleaning his weed pipe when he was arrested. There was the blockhead who had tried to steal the sheriff's own bathtub. Everybody was baffled by my story. Hispanic people were surprised to see a blue-eyed and fair-haired guy so ignorant of Anglo-Saxon habits and culture. People had a deck of cards. They asked if I would play with them. I tried to teach them Beloti. Obviously it was too tricky. I was asked many interesting questions. Do you have McDonald's in France? Do you have Twinkies? This one puzzled me. I didn't know the stuff. They offered me one. Let me thank them. That official meal that came on the morning was the most disgusting of my whole life. As they had taken all my money from me, I only had the normal prison grub, while the inmates could buy crisps, sweets and cakes. The drug pusher, a smart guy, actually, explained to me that the whole prison system was geared toward extracting as much money as possible from the inmates. A shocking revelation. There came the curfew. I had to find a bed. To my surprise, I realized that the dorm was neatly divided, the whites on the left, the blacks on the right. And the only place left was in the black section. Just below me was, say, the kingpin. During hours and hours, he kept talking to his visibly sycophantic neighbors, yelling, "Wawa wawa nigger, wawa wawa bro." I just could catch those two words. Once he turned to me and, switching to more standard English, ironically commented, "This is a fucking professor at Andem," before returning to his mumbo-jumbo. Was the irony directed at me, or at the system that had put me there? I didn't get it. Frankly, I would rather have slept, but I found it ill-advised to complain about the loud neighborhood. The next morning, I was called to arraignment. Of course, I didn't know the word. I drew a smile from the jailer by ingenuously asking, "Who is Raymond?" A judge first lectured me in legal gobbledygook. I panicked as I just could catch one word now and then. He explained to me again in plain English. The case was not dropped, but I could be released if I paid a sum of money. The jailer who had accompanied me expressed again his surprise that the charges had not been dropped. I could call my friends from Dallas. They undertook the formalities for my release. Together we discovered the fantastic world of bail bond agencies, roamed the county to find the pound where my car had been taken. No one had told me about its whereabouts. One of their neighbors gave me the business card of a lawyer. I flew back to France as soon as I could, shivering with the fear that one could detain me. The judicial process ran its course. The grand jury did not dismiss the case, but finally my lawyer negotiated the requalification. The evading arrest charge was dropped. I was fined twice, once for excessive speed, once for failure to give right-of-way. The total cost of this fine little joke, bail deposit plus car pound plus lawyer fees plus fines, was almost $10,000. I never came back to the US. In the form that must be filled to obtain the visa waiver, actually, almost as complicated as the visa was, there is one question: have you ever been arrested or detained in the US? I can't even think of that. Edit, double thanks to the many Texans and Americans who have expressed their kind sympathy and said they were sorry. Don't worry, I have met lots of nice Americans and Texans, and I don't have a bad memory of you as a people. This is a typical power abuse story within a police and justice and correctional system which have turned to soulless and heartless cash machines. Most often at the expense of people who can't afford it, unlike me.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future also. Don't forget to like and subscribe to you never miss a video.